Welcome again. The Greater Houston Partnership is presenting today's COVID-19 Houston Business Forum. It is a forum that we've been hosting since March, and today we have a very special presentation regarding the back to school and kind of a regional update on where we are with back to school, featuring Drs. Rodney Watson, Superintendent of the Spring Independent School District, and Wells, Executive Director for Region 4 Education Service Center. For us here at the partnership, it's already been a very busy day. We hosted our President's Address this morning with a special guest, Dr. Mark Boom. If you would like to view that program, that will be on our website later today, as well as we do have a Future of Work presentation taking place with Marcela Escobar from the Brookings Institution and their Global Economy Development Program that's taking place right now. And both of those will be available for viewing later on our website. So please do join us for that. If you have questions for our speakers today, please do submit those on the Q&A tab, not the chat feature, but the Q&A tab. That'll help us keep those sorted. But you can use the chat feature if you have any technical issues, and our team will respond. I'd like to now turn things over to Ben Melson. He's the Director of Public Policy at the Greater Houston Partnership. He'll take the program on from here, introduce our speakers, and then lead our moderated session. Ben.
Great, thank you, Carrie. So I'm so very excited today to have the opportunity to introduce two incredible education leaders in our region who have joined us for the back to school conversation today, Dr. Pam Wells and Dr. Rodney Watson. Dr. Wells became the Executive Director of Region 4 Education Service Center back in 2012. Before being named Executive Director, Pam worked at Cy-Fair ISD for about 33 years. And for those of you who may not know, more than 50 years ago, the Texas legislature established regional education service centers with the purpose of helping our school districts and charter schools improve student performance, operate more efficiently, and implement state initiatives. So Pam and her team at Region 4 worked tirelessly to support the 54 school districts and over 1,300 campuses, along with about 1.2 million students in our region. Dr. Rodney Watson became Superintendent of Spring ISD in July of 2014. Spring ISD serves about 36,000 students and is in a very diverse and growing community, about 20 miles outside the center of downtown Houston. Under Dr. Watson's leadership, Spring ISD launched an ambitious 5-year strategic plan called Every Child 2020. This strategic plan has already resulted in profound effects on student outcomes, with an increase in third grade literacy or reading achievement by about 16%. They also launched 7 new pre-kindergarten programs, which have led to a 17% increase to kindergarten students reading on grade level, and have significantly increased the number of students who take AP exams by about 41%, and the number of students who score a 3 or better on those exams by about 40%. Paving the way for increased college acceptance and career readiness for their students. So Pam, let's go ahead and start with you. I'll turn it over to you for your remarks.
Thank you very much, Ben. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to participate in this webinar today, especially with such a great school leader as Dr. Watson. If you'll go to my first slide, I just want to give you a little bit more of a context for what Ben was sharing with you about education service centers. Region 4 is the largest of the 20 education service centers in the state. We actually are a quasi-governmental entity that does not have a tax revenue stream. So about 60 to 70% of the revenue that we generate, we do so in an entrepreneurial fashion. And we are what our name implies. We are a service to the schools we serve. One of the things that's kind of interesting is a lot of people think about the Houston area as being the large school districts, but we also have some school districts in Region 4 that have less than 250 children in the entire district. If you'll go to the next slide, just a little bit more of a context. There are 48 traditional school districts in Region 4, 39 public charter schools, more than 1,500 campuses. There are about 76,000 teachers, and if you add on principals and counselors and librarians, we have about 99,000 professional staff. We also serve bus drivers and child nutrition directors. And so overall, the staff that we serve and help train and support through technical assistance is about 157,000 people. You'll go to the next slide. One of the things that we were asked to talk about, of course, it has to do with how the schools are going to be able to make decisions. What are those best decisions they can make to do two things? They want to make sure that they maintain the safety and health of their students and their staff. They also, of course, are concerned about doing a good job with instruction for their students. And so I will tell you that one of the things Region 4 does is to provide an opportunity for all the superintendents in the region to get together and to discuss challenges and share ideas about how they are going to approach this particular crisis, which is unlike any that we have ever had, of course, for educators and for parents and for students. And one of the things that has been happening during this is the Texas Education Agency has been providing guidance to the school districts across the state. And although we're not going to click on it, I wanted to provide for you the link address for some of the information that the Texas Education Agency has provided to the schools as it relates to getting back to school this year. I want to share with you as you think about the challenges that our school district superintendents are facing. As we were preparing for today, we had some idea about what was going to be happening based on decisions that local health authorities had made. But then just yesterday, there was a decision made by the Attorney General that caused the Texas Education Agency to make some changes in the guidance and direction that the school district superintendents had. So it's been quite a challenge for school district superintendents to be able to make decisions. For some of you, I bet there's some people watching who have either been teachers or school leaders or are married to people who are, and you know that planning is a real key to the success of our educational system. And the superintendents and school leaders have been having to change that planning on almost a weekly basis. So I just ask that you provide them with some time to be able to take in the additional new information that they currently have been given as they are trying to make the best decisions for their students first, for their staff, and for the families that they serve. If you'll go to the next slide, yesterday, this was actually posted for the school district leaders to use, and it actually is a guidebook that provides school leaders with information based on the CDC guidelines and also TEA regulations. Those CDC guidelines just recently changed. So just yesterday, our school leaders were provided with this new guidance. Once again, this is publicly facing, so parents or business leaders have the opportunity to go on and to see the kind of information that our school district leaders are needing to address. You know, one of the things that I think everyone will say is that obviously the very best place for children to be educated is in the classroom. That being said, as we know what is happening certainly in our community today with the spread of COVID-19, that makes these decisions very challenging. So I want you to, if you'll go to the next slide, I want you to know that one of the challenges that our school district leaders have been having to deal with is the issue of the equity gap as it relates to connectivity. When the school district superintendents had to and their teachers had to very quickly pivot in the springtime to teaching in a virtual environment. One of the huge challenges is that not all the children in the Houston region had access to the kind of devices and the kind of connectivity that they needed to be successful. In some cases, they may have had some connectivity, but it wasn't enough for 2 or 3 children in a family to be able to utilize to be successful. And I read enough social media posts from families to know that this was a real challenge for families as well. And so I very much want to commend the school district superintendents across the region for how collaborative they have been with their families, with their staff members, and even with their students, getting feedback from them about what is it that schools need to do differently, what do they need to continue to do that they did during the springtime, and also what are some tools that the school districts and the children, the students, and the families might have that can help them be more successful. Because even for those parents and children who ultimately end up back in school in a face-to-face environment, we know from what the medical authorities have told us that there are going to be cases in those schools, and there will be situations where those schools have to shut down. And so we know that virtual learning is going to continue to be an important part of the work that schools do. And so I want to share with you just a little bit of information about something that I'm very excited about, and that is the Operation Connectivity Initiative that is going on. It started actually here in the Houston area. I'm so pleased to commend Mayor Turner for recognizing what a significant issue this was for the children in our region. He started a Health Equity Response Task Force and created as a part of that task force the Technology Access Committee. That was started in April. Gabby Rowe was the committee chair, and she negotiated some very favorable rates for the school districts in Region 4 for devices and hotspots. The only challenge was that across the country, school districts and states are right now trying to vie for the limited supply that there are of computer devices and hotspots. And so even though the school districts in Region 4 had some really good prices that the vendors had agreed to, they were being told that they might not get these devices until potentially the springtime, which really was not going to help the children this fall. And so what happened is about a little bit after that, a month after that, the governor started an Operation Connectivity Task Force. And one of the things this task force did, it was actually the governor and the Commissioner of Education, all in partnership with the superintendent in Dallas, they began exploring the statewide bulk purchase. Then they ended up, and this was made all of the educators and should have made the parents as well happy and the business leaders. The governor and legislative leaders and the commissioner announced a $200 million CARES Act allocation for devices and hotspots. The problem was we still had the supply chain problem. And so what happened is the Texas Education Agency and the governor's task force realized what was happening in Houston, and the fact that Gabby and the mayor's Technology Access Committee, of which Region 4 was a part, they had already developed these relationships with vendors and had these prices. And so what they decided to do was to actually engage in a bulk purchase for the entire state of Texas, with the goal of putting Texas devices and hotspots at the top of the order list, ahead of maybe individual school districts across the country or maybe smaller states. And so TEA asked Region 4, the organization that I lead, to actually administer this state bulk order process. And the reason they asked us to do that is actually the state Texas Education Agency doesn't have any vehicle to be able to accept money from school districts. And this particular grant is a matching grant. So on one side, the prices are excellent prices that really I've never seen before. And then in addition, there is a match that the school districts are required to provide. So this $200 million grant will allow for $400 million of purchases of devices and that connectivity for our students. So it is a really, really important effort. And if we go to the next slide, I want to share with you that this is going to allow, actually I've kind of already talked about this. If you look on the left-hand side, this just shows basically what I had already shared with you. If you'll go to the next slide then, please. This is going to allow over 1 million devices and almost 500,000 hotspots to be purchased. And these purchases are primarily being made for those students and families that do not have connectivity. And we have so many in our community that are in that position. And so we had the school districts across the state had the opportunity to identify how many of these devices they wanted to order at that match. And they've turned those in, and we are currently sorting through all of that so that we can make sure that we are making the purchases that the school districts want. There were several different vendors of both devices and of hotspots that they were going to be able, and because the allocation is being based on the number of children in a school district that are on free and reduced lunch, those children who are in poverty. It meant that some of the allocations that the school districts had requested, they were not going to be able to get, but they are going to be able to purchase those at the same reduced price. And in fact, if you look at this graph, you can see that the vast majority, the dark blue, 90% of the devices and 96% of the hotspots that school districts said they needed are going to be funded through this grant. If you'll go to the next slide, please. This just kind of shares with you information about that funding allocation and what I shared about the bulk order. If there are additional dollars available later on, then school districts that had already purchased devices this spring in preparation for what they felt was going to be important for their students in the fall, then there will be an opportunity, we hope, to have some reimbursement as well. So I share this with the people in Houston, the business people in Houston, to say how proud I am once again of Mayor Turner for his efforts to close that equity gap for children. I'm very appreciative that he looked at this not just as a city initiative, but as a Region 4 initiative, including all of the 7 counties in Region 4, because we know, especially as we're talking about the economy of our region, it isn't separated by our counties. So I really appreciate that. I know the county government is also becoming involved in this, and the system does allow for some opportunity for entities that have received CARES dollars to assist in continuing to close that gap, because although this is tremendously important, we know there still will be a gap. And as a community, and not just as educators, but we know that the members of the Greater Houston Partnership recognize how important student success is, certainly first and foremost to the individual children we serve and their families, but certainly also to the economy of our region. So with that, I will be happy later on to answer any questions that you have. And also my contact information is there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions in the future as well.
Great, thank you, Pam. We'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Watson for his remarks now.
Thank you. So thank you very much for having me today. On behalf of all of our Board of Trustees here in Spring ISD, we're excited to be able to share with you the plan that we have for the 2020-21 school year. And as you can see here, our plan is called our Safety First plan for our families. Paramount to developing our plan was some guiding beliefs that we went into during our planning process. We wanted everyone to understand that student learning must be the cornerstone for all decisions. And we know that during this pandemic, there are so many competing variables, so many competing things, that student learning is what we are called to do. In that process, we understand that the learning needs for every single student must be met. And so we wanted a plan that really took into account all of the learning needs of our students. In addition to that, the health and safety of our students and staff is a priority. And so once we understood that we were responsible for learning, we wanted to make sure that we were going to be able to do so in a way that took into account the safety of our staff as well as our students. I think the last 2 points were extremely important for us regarding our school community is responsible for making the lives of those living in it better, that as a community of Spring ISD, it is our collective responsibility to ensure that we're making the lives of those living within our community better. But it's also the community's collective responsibility to invest in the health, the success, and the vitality of its members. And for us, I normally say to our community all the time that our schools are only as strong as our school district, and our community is only as strong, our community is only as strong as our school district, and our school district is only as strong as our community, meaning that there's a reciprocal process that we must work together to ensure that for our community. In addition to that, once we began developing our scenarios, it was important for us that we really framed the work that we were going to be doing. And so at the outset of our planning process, we really went into it focused on 4 basic scenarios. One would be the schools would open with minimal social distancing. And I think as we started this process in April and May, that we really were going into it saying, okay, this too shall pass. So there's a possibility we will be able to open schools with minimal social distancing, or schools opening with significant need for social distancing. Scenario 3, schools open with rolling closures and a significant need for social distancing. Or 4, where we're seeing ourselves now as schools do not open and remote learning continues. So as we began this work, we really wanted to hear from our community, and not just our internal community, but our external community, really listening to our business partners as well as our parents in terms of what we were going to do as we planned for the fall. And so we enlisted over 100 members to really help decide and develop what we consider to be our micro plans. And as you can see here on the left-hand side, there were actually 11 different planning teams that really focused in on 11 specific areas. And we took those 11 areas and really pulled those together into 5 intentional micro plans that focused on school schedules and class configurations, student learning, staff and professional development, student and family support, as well as facility planning. And then we gave those teams some very intentional focus areas by which to guide their conversations through the planning process. When we came to May, we finished our spring semester, we were able to fulfill the commitment for graduation for our seniors. One of the things that was paramount to our board was really wanting to ensure access, equity and access, not just for technology devices, but access in terms of connectivity. And so in May, we did place an additional order for 11,000 Chromebooks. We had already placed an order in April, but we placed another order in May, really wanting to ensure that our students have the technology necessary to facilitate learning. In addition to that, we did take a bold step and we developed an intersessional calendar. We had already gone through the process of having our families participate in a survey to help select the calendar, the best calendar option for our district, like we normally do. But we found ourselves in the middle of this pandemic wanting to ensure that we took into account the learning loss that happened from March all the way through the end of the year, as well as the potential learning loss that could happen during this coming school year. So within that model, within that frame of reference, we did develop an intersessional calendar that really provides opportunities for us to extend our year. So our year is extended from August 17th at our start all the way through the end of June. And what this intersessional calendar really allows us to be able to do, it provides breaks should the COVID-19 contagion increase within any particular zip code in Spring ISD or within our district or county. It allows us to take those breaks, but to have those times already built into our schedule so we're not continuing to extend the year at the very end of the calendar. In addition to that, should we not need those breaks, it does provide us time during the school year to really work on those remedial skills that kids missed as it relates to being out from March until the end of the year, but it also provides opportunities for acceleration, for us to take kids that are already there, but to accelerate them further than they were. So from our board standpoint, our team of 8, we really wanted to provide that maximum opportunity to help close that gap for kids that needed it, but as well as accelerate for the kids as well. In June, we did have our scenario-based planning kickoff with all of the individuals that I mentioned previously. And within that process, we were able to share our plan with our board on June 20th. I think paramount to Dr. Wells' statements is that, yeah, things change on a regular basis. And so we had shared our plan and what we were ready to do and to move forward for the fall. And then on July 7th, TEA released new guidelines, new guidance. And so we had to go back to the drawing board and really look at some of the areas within our planning and take into an account the new guidance provided by the TEA. Then on July 17th, TEA did communicate something different than on the 7th, based upon new guidance that had come out, and that we were going to need to be able to be open remote learning for all the students. And so once again, we are remaining nimble to be able to meet the needs of our community. What was extremely important for us as we went into this student learning process was to really think about, are we victims of the virus, or does this provide opportunities for us to reimagine school? And so one of the things and the mindsets, the growth mindset that we've tried to take on here in spring is the COVID-19 contagion, this pandemic that we all are working through, has also provided us some opportunities to reimagine how we do things. And so, as you'll see, we are providing our families two options for the 2020-21 school year. The first option is our safety first in-person option, as well as our empowered learning at home, more of our remote options. Now, it's important to understand that both options include the ability for our students to participate in co-curricular activities, as well as the full suite of district, student, and family supports, both synchronous and asynchronous learning, as well as the standards-based curriculum with PBL experiences. I think listening to our families, the feedback that they had from the spring semester as compared to what we were planning for the summer and the fall, we wanted to make sure that we heard them. We understood that we changed and flipped on a dime when we went from in-person instruction to totally remote right after spring break. Well, we wanted to hear parents to let them know that what we are providing students in the fall would be totally different than what we were able to provide them in the spring. And in listening to our families, one of the things that they really wanted to know more about was the structure of the day. They were most interested in finding out is, will we need to provide all the instruction for our kids, and you all are giving us assignments for them to complete, and we're responsible? And so what we provided our families was a very detailed schedule. So we provided a schedule from the very beginning of the day to the end of the day, really providing opportunities for them to understand these are the actual minutes of instruction that your child will receive from teachers throughout the day, and that it would be a full day of learning with academic rigor and relevance as it relates to the type of instruction for our safety first, in person, as well as our empowered learning at home models. In addition to that, it was important for us to help our families understand that across both in-person and remote learning environments, that student learning was going to be teacher-directed versus parent-directed, as was done in the spring in a number of cases. In addition to that, our parents wanted subject-specific instruction and not necessarily cross-functional or cross-collaborative types of assignments as we had provided in the spring. We are using a platform and learning management system called Schoology, and Schoology will be that unifying tool that's really going to connect that in-person to that virtual learning experience for our students. And once again, it was important for us to make sure that the district scope and sequence, all of the standards and assessments would be included in our process. Now, one of the things that was really interesting for us this past spring semester, we have over 35,000 students, and as was stated in our introduction, we have over 80% of our students are economically disadvantaged, and so we know that there's needs that our students have. We did implement project-based learning as a primary tool for learning this spring semester, and we received a lot of feedback from that. I think one of the things that we were most surprised on is with the number of economically disadvantaged students that we have as compared to the number of students that actually submitted all of their assignments this past spring semester. It really gave us pause to really think about the supports that we provided our families as well as their parents and the work that they did to help support them to complete those assignments. Paramount to our planning this year was also around special education. And I think as we'll go a little bit further into our model, we are taking into account our students, especially our profound students, that we know that remote learning will not be the best tool to provide that education for them. But for our families, it was important for us to understand and to help them understand that they will receive an appropriate device, internet access. Not only will we be focused on the academics, but the social and emotional piece of the trauma-informed care for our students, because we know that many of our students are experiencing losses and a change to normalcy, as well as the small group supports, language supports, and any other accommodation as indicated in their IEP. Child nutrition has been a big area. Since spring break, our staff has not stopped feeding our families. We know there are families with over 80% economically disadvantaged. We have a lot of families who depend on us every single day for meals for their children, breakfast, lunch, and even after school meals at times. And so it's important for us to understand that regardless of the type of environment parents chose for their kids, that they would receive nutritious meals from the school district every single day. And as needed, we will be flexible for our in-person students that we might need to change the location or how we're delivering those meals, but we wanted to make sure that meals would not be an issue that caused our students not to have access throughout the day. I think some of the major topics that you've seen in the media is this digital divide around instructional technology. And so our board took a very proactive stance at the very beginning of the pandemic by allocating over $5 million to allow me to go and purchase additional technology. And thanks to Operation Connectivity and other things that are going on within our state, we've been able to take money and funds that will be reimbursed for, or at least a percentage of that, and replace or reallocate that money for additional technology. We want our families to know that we will provide them a device, and that students who need a device will have access to those devices as well as hotspots. We know that it's been extremely difficult for us to be able to find companies that are able to send us the hotspots on demand and based upon the time that we have. And so we're really hoping that the Operation Connectivity provides the resources for the devices as well as the hotspots in time for the student learning in the fall. Additional family supports included that families will be fully supported through digital and non-digital modes. We did get feedback from parents who indicated that they, of course, want technology, but will they have some other non-digital or at the bottom, low-tech types of support as well from our district? We do have a district help desk as well, and it was enhanced to really support our families in multiple language, as well as not only will technical support be provided, but the also academic, social, and emotional support for all of our students and families as well. We noticed that during the pandemic, not only were we providing that academic support, but our families really relied on the information from our Director of Mental Health and all of the mental health state needed to support them as they transition with their children, as well as their own family needs as they were also transitioning to remote working environments with their own personal families and their jobs. And so as we look at our safety first model here, it's important to understand that paramount to our decisions, our community really wanted to know, how will you all make decisions? Will it be done in a black box, or how transparent will you be in terms of helping us understand how we'll know when it's time to move in? And so not only are we looking at the level of COVID-19 contagion within our county, we're looking at that based upon all of the zip codes of all of our district facilities and our schools as well. In addition to that, we look at the data based upon the top 10 zip codes from where our staff is coming. So we have a sense of what's happening within the communities where our staff are living as well. What you see here is our operational decision meter. It does coincide a little bit with the Harris County threat assessment. However, we did let our community know that our meter is based specifically on what's happening in our county and the zip codes within our area as well as our staff. As we look at our specific meter, we're currently in the red, and red would mean if we were in school that the majority of our students would participate in remote learning until the COVID-19 contagion level improves. We do reserve the right for some small group instruction, and once again, this is where our students with special needs come in. We do believe that there are some ways that we can appropriately social distance, keeping our staff and students safe by really bringing in those students who need us the most that would not be successful in a remote environment. And so we are able to provide that as required or needed based upon TEA guidance. As we transition from red to orange, all of our students that are participating in person, so I think it's important to understand that we have families that have chosen to go remote and we have families that have chosen the in-person. So once we were able to move to orange, for all families that chose the in-person level of instruction, these students would attend school on an alternating day. So this is really more of a hybrid, flexible schedule with remote learning on Wednesdays for all campuses. So we could really deep clean our campuses during the middle of the week. Daily small group, in-person, secondary instruction may be provided as appropriate or needed as well. As we're looking at orange, we really wanted to provide our families a little bit more detail as to how we would develop those schedules. So as you can see here, for the most part, those students that have the last names of A through K, they would be provided instruction on Mondays. pre-K through 12, and those students with the last names beginning with L through Z would have instruction on B days. And so you see the alternating schedule that we have, with Wednesdays being at-home synchronous or asynchronous learning or instruction for all students, which really provides that opportunity for deep cleaning. Our goal here is, we've had a lot of conversation with parents and teachers, that even when we're able to have in-person, for those families who chose in-person, we really wanted to keep that 50-50 split, thus decreasing the size of the number of students within the building, as well as the number of students in individual classes. In addition, once we transition to yellow, all safety first in-person students would attend school daily, but with strict social distancing protocols in place. And once again, for in-person in green, all safety first in-person students would attend school daily, but with continued social distancing protocols in place as needed. So just as we have this operational decision meter for our students and for our families, we also have one that coincides for our teachers as well. It was also important for us to really talk about the cleaning and sanitizing protocols, to give parents reassurance, but also to give our staff reassurance of the protocols that we would have in place regarding the classroom structure, the cleaning supplies, the cloth. In the district, we did make a recommendation that masks will be required for all staff and students as developmentally appropriate, that we would use our cafeteria on a case-by-case basis, based upon the need of the campus and based upon the social distancing protocols within the building as well. In addition to that, our teachers were most concerned about the classroom configurations and really wanting to make sure there was adequate space, but also letting them know that plexiglass dividers would also be used where social distancing was not feasible, based upon some of our buildings are older buildings and the space that is not conducive, as well as others in some of our newer buildings. In addition, a lot of our primary parents or elementary parents were interested in the school supplies. You know, we've traditionally used the model where we've had community supplies. We let parents know that we would not use community supplies as our philosophy for this year, that student school supplies would be kept separate. Paramount to changing our calendar as well as our schedule. We did change our schedule this year in terms of the starting and ending times for our campuses, and this was really done to really support the cleaning for transportation. Really wanted to make sure that all of those high-touch surface areas would be addressed in between routes, as well as using our electrostatic gun to ensure that the buses were cleaned appropriately between each lift site as well, letting them know the signage requiring masks would be on the buses as developmentally appropriate, and that we wouldn't just say that they're needed, but we would actually supply those for students as well. Making the hand sanitizer as well, letting parents know that we are looking at the ventilation on our buses in terms of running the air conditioner, as well as keeping the windows down to increase the airflow. But being really clear about that buses would not refuse transportation in the mornings, and students would not be left at any stops. And if a student appeared symptomatic, that we had very intentional protocols back at the campus as well as on the bus to ensure parents that we would not jeopardize the health of their students and staff as students reported sicknesses while on the bus. And so that does provide us a general overview of the planning that we've provided, but more importantly, again, it's important for us to understand that school districts need all of the support as possible from our communities, and to understand that as things change, a lot of grace and mercy on both sides goes a long way. But thank you so much for allowing me to share, and I'll turn it back over.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. And sorry, my video is not working right now. But thank you both so much for your leadership and during this incredibly difficult time. I think I can speak for everybody here that we're so thankful for to have folks like y'all working to get our students back in school as quickly as possible and still learning in the meantime. But now I think I'd like to begin our discussion, and then we'll follow that up with an audience Q&A. So any questions that the audience has, please feel free to submit those in the Q&A box down there at the bottom, and we'll try and get to those towards the end of our conversation today. But again, I would like to sort of preference this conversation that things are changing daily, and will probably continue to change daily as the COVID-19 situation evolves. So let's just keep that in mind as we work through these questions and work through the audience questions as well. But I thought we would start with sort of the current landscape of reopening. And Pam, you gave a great overview of where everything stands now. But I wondered if you could give us a little bit more insight to exactly what the AG's opinion was and what that sort of means for rethinking how we're going to reopen.
Certainly. So in addition to Harris County and the city of Houston, across the state, there were many health authorities and local governments that had made orders for school districts to not engage in face-to-face instruction. In many cases, those entities identified after Labor Day as the first potential day for face-to-face instruction. And so all of our school districts were working under the assumption that they would do one of two things. They would either wait and begin their school year after Labor Day, or they might begin virtual instruction before then. But in both cases, the Texas Education Agency had provided information to our school leaders that if they were in an area where a health authority ordered them to be closed, that they would receive state funding for the virtual instruction that they were providing for all of their students. Yesterday's letter, and my understanding is it wasn't, it was a guidance and guidance that might end up being used by others to put pressure on school districts. But that guidance said that local health authorities did not have the right to do a preventative shutdown of schools. And I am not a lawyer, so this is an educator's interpretation. Please understand that. But that certainly it was the school officials, and by that I think probably they meant the Texas Education Agency, that would make decisions about that, especially as it relates to funding. So we had some of our school districts in the region who had already, as I said, intended to start school virtually. But what the state does allow, they do allow for a school district to choose for 4 weeks to be entirely virtual, except for those families that don't have any access. And then with a board vote, they can choose to have another 4 weeks of only virtual instruction. And then after that, they would have to allow face-to-face. And I know there are a lot of families who are concerned about wanting schools to start. Just as Dr. Watson said, I just hope everyone will give grace to the school leaders, because many of the teachers are folks who themselves may have underlying health conditions. They may have family members who do. So there's a great deal of concern on the part of many teachers, not all, but many teachers, about going back face-to-face. So one of the challenges the school districts face when things change like this is they have to try to figure out how many children are they going to be educating in a virtual environment, how many children might they be educating once face-to-face occurs, and what are the teacher needs for that. So I know many people would love for the schools to be able to immediately answer all of those questions, and quite frankly, I assure you they would as well. But with some of these changing situations, it's difficult. So as of yesterday, the Commissioner of Education informed school district superintendents that they would not receive funding if they were closed because of an order from a local health agency. Now, one thing that the Attorney General's letter did say is that those health agencies, those health authorities do have the authority to close a school once there is some sort of contagion, but not in a preemptive fashion. And once again, I want to remind everyone, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just sharing what I'm understanding and what the school districts understand about the guidance that they received, both from the Attorney General and also from the Commissioner of Education.
Well, thank you, Pam. That was a really fantastic overview, given that it's less than 24 hours since the letter was written. So that's great. Dr. Watson, did you have any comments on that?
The only other additional comment that I would have is that, you know, that's further indication of our nimbleness that we're having to be in terms of planning. For us, we're planning for over 35,000 students that come back in the fall. And so there's a lot that goes into our planning processes. And so it would be nice for all of us to get on the same page so we don't have to keep going back and forth in terms of what we're doing for kids.
Right, Dr. Watson, and you and your district have a fantastic plan. I mean, it is really holistic on reopening, and obviously these changes and directives are going to be a major hurdle, but are there any other major hurdles that you and your district have identified in approaching the fall semester?
Absolutely. Paramount to that is our own staff, you know, really wanting to make sure that our staff understands that, you know, we are thinking about you. We're not going to place you in a situation where you are going to have health issues because of the lack of preparation on our standpoint. And so having them a part of the process has helped a little bit. However, many of them have their own kids. Many of them are wondering what's going to happen with my own child as it relates to me teaching remote or being asked to come to work and teach remote. And so just this past week, we met with over 71 providers. So as an added benefit in Spring ISD, we are looking at providing opportunities for these providers to work within our school district to provide that support for our teachers. So our teachers can come to school and rest assured know that their own personal kids will be there with a teacher or another individual in our district that's not able to do their job remotely, but are able to provide support with other providers to ensure that our staff's kids are being taken care of, they're being educated while they're on remote, or they're participating in remote learning, either from teachers within our district or from teachers outside of our district. And so that has really helped our staff a lot, knowing that we are looking at providing that support for them when they are able to come in and actually provide the in-person or remote learning as well. But we also are looking at all of the other staff members within our district that are able to provide additional services. And so once again, not only are we being asked to be nimble, we are asking our staff to remain nimble as well to really respond to our community. Just recently, I heard some parents that we understand really need to go to work, and even with all of the support of their children being online for 4 or 5 hours a day with their teachers there with them, that still poses an issue with them being able to do their jobs as well. And so we are looking at our own internal learning pod types of things with staff members, again, whose roles may change as a result of being remote for a season. And we're looking at all of the resources that we have in the district to ensure that our community, that we are thinking about them and working with them. It's not working against, we all are working together.
That's fantastic. And yeah, thinking about the community and just the general student population in our region, we've got over 500,000 students as of the 1920 school year who qualified for free or reduced lunch. And obviously our public schools are really a sanctuary for so many children in our region, especially given the size of our region. I wonder, how does starting the fall semester online only and then this sort of phase-in approach potentially impact any of the food services, food access, and then some of those wraparound services as well? I imagine it needs to be extremely nimble at this point, but I'll open that question to either of you. Dr. Wells, would you have a comment?
I'll just start and then let Dr. Watson give a more specific example. But the whole issue of food insecurity is something that our school leaders are very, very concerned about. They were during the springtime when they did this just on a dime, but I know many of the school districts determined ways that they could get food out into the community. Some of them use their buses to deliver food out, but there are a lot of rules that the school district superintendents have to consider as they are doing that. We were very pleased that the federal government and then the Texas Department of Agriculture allowed a lot of waivers so that school districts could do the very best job they possibly could to get food out. One thing that Region 4 has done is to create a food insecurity collaborative made up of not only folks who work with school district child nutrition departments, but also organizations like the American Heart Association, the Food Bank, the YMCA, Brighter Bites, lots of different organizations to try to see what can we do as a collective group. The city and county are involved in that as well to try to help support what the schools are able to do. Because one thing that happened during the springtime is that there were many, many more children eligible to get food then ended up, their families came to get it. So we know that there was a gap. And as a community, I think we need to do everything we possibly can to recognize that as a really critical problem.
The only thing that I would add to that is, at the end of the day, we will not sacrifice feeding our kids. We're going to do whatever's necessary to ensure that they all have meals. And so this past spring semester, we primarily did so, like many other districts, by doing curbside pickup. We do know that more families, as Dr. Wells indicated, needed meals than were able or had transportation to come and pick it up. So we are looking at alternative ways to get food to their neighborhood, as well as to the bus stops that we normally have, so families can come within their own communities or complexes to get meals in a very safe environment. But at the end of the day, we will not sacrifice not feeding our kids for any reason.
Great. Thank you both. So before we move on to digital access, I did want to put in a brief plug for a new page on the partnerships website where we've got every school district in our region and their reopening plan as it stands now. And we'll continue to update that as things change and we receive new resources and materials. So please feel free to reach out or take a look at that webpage. So moving over to digital access, Pam, you gave us a fantastic overview and we really so grateful for your work with the TEA on that. I've been relatively involved in that process for a while and I'm grateful for your leadership there. It's not an easy job. We know now that there's about 1.8 million students across the state who do not have access to either a device or the internet, and that's what the state is working to address, and our school districts in our region have worked to address. Dr. Watson, I wonder if you can give us some insight into the connectivity needs of your students and teachers in your district.
Absolutely. As we've gone through and surveyed our parents, it was interesting in the spring semester that individuals that indicated that they had some form of device at their house was a little higher than what parents are indicating that they need now. And some of the things that we're thinking is parents were sharing their work device or devices that they use in their house for work with their kids to able to afford them the opportunity for learning. And so now that students may be at home for a while and parents are still working from home, that they actually need a device. And so once again, we've taken a lot of proactive stances to order that through Operation Connectivity. We just ordered an additional 9,200 Chromebooks and over 3,000 hotspots. And we're thinking that that will provide all of the connectivity within our area. Some of the other things that we've done is really work to help educate our parents, especially in areas where there is connectivity, but really working with apartment complexes, stores, malls, and other areas that have free Wi-Fi, providing an opportunity for our families to be able to tap into that. And so our Family and Community Engagement Department is really taking a proactive stance and really trying to connect our families with the resources within their community, letting them know that here's a device, you do have access, let us show you how to access that, and then working with those community businesses to make sure that when they're interacting on that they can actually have access and for a continued period of time.
Great. So a question for both of you again, really here on, since, you know, towards the end of last semester, we know that there were a significant number of students who were not able to access their online learning platform, and now looking at the situation we're facing in the fall with potentially going online for an extended period of time again, what concerns do you have? What concerns does the state have regarding the students who are not able to access their online learning platform and potentially a negative impact on their educational outcomes as it stands now? Dr. Wells?
I'll go ahead and take a stab at that. I think the state has great concerns, and once again, I give kudos to the governor and the leadership and the commissioner for this really absolutely extraordinary plan to try to cut that equity gap significantly with Operation Connectivity. But I also know that there are a lot of school districts, especially ones in small rural areas of the state, that may not have some of the capacity that that we are able to provide for other school districts. And so I know that there are efforts to actually this is actually an effort to give devices and hotspots. There's some parts of our state where hotspots won't help. And so there are going to be some additional phases to this to try to expand that connectivity. But they also, the Texas Education Agency is also providing for those school districts that do not already have one, a platform, and it's called an LMS. It's a platform to be able to put a curriculum on so that a learning management system, so school districts will be able to more effectively teach their children. And also are providing some curricular materials online, something called Texas Home Learning, that is going to be provided. Both of those are going to be provided at no cost to schools. So I know that the Commissioner of Education and the rest of the leadership recognizes that this is an issue that we all need to work together on, because it is truly probably one of the most significant issues related to equity of our time. And the good news about this, and this is one of the reasons why the mayor wanted to implement the Health Equity Response Task Force as it related to technology, is that this isn't just for students. These are also going to benefit families for things like telehealth, for them to have the opportunity to look for jobs and do, upskilling. So I think this is going to end up helping far beyond the children, although it's focused on the children, and that is the purpose. But I think it's going to help far beyond that.
Dr. Watson, how are you and your school district approaching this issue?
So for us, we have developed, our board has developed a new initiative, an equity initiative, and have developed a new equity, or working to develop a new equity plan. For us, I think there's sometimes a misnomer, depending upon what you're reading in the newspaper or what you're hearing. As educators, we want our kids at school. We want to be at school. We know that the best possible place for kids to be during the day is to get quality instruction from an excellent teacher within the four walls. And because we know that, we want to be able to do that. So that's our ultimate goal, is to be able to bring kids back to school to get that. But from an equity standpoint, we also know that we have a population of our students who depend on us for 100% of their instruction, their food, and their socialization. And we want those kids there, and we accept, just as I would go to a hospital and I would want the doctors who have been well trained to be able to meet and service me and to make sure that my family is well. We know that our families depend upon us for that, and we accept that responsibility. We want that responsibility. We just want to be able to do so in a manner that's conducive to students as well as staff. And so from that, in spring, that's why our model is a hybrid model, because we control if we're red, orange, yellow, or green. And so based upon the numbers, the data, and the science and the feedback that we get from doctors, we reserve the right to move that to orange and to begin to bring kids in, because we cannot let our students who need us the most suffer. And so if anyone asks, do you think that there was student learning loss in the spring? Absolutely. And do you believe that it's our responsibility as educators to close that gap? Absolutely. And so we're doing everything that we can to be able to do that, but to do so in a safe manner.
It's great. So I feel like I could talk to you all day, but given the time, we'll go ahead and switch over to some Q&A from the audience. And Dr. Wells, we'll start with you. A question from Elizabeth Killinger. Many small private schools appear to be reopening for in-person classes sooner than public schools. Is that correct? And will there be coordination between so that lessons learned can be shared?
So I'm sure, just like traditional and public charter schools, probably there are lots of different arrangements that the private schools in our region are planning. I will say that Region 4 just recently partnered with TDEM, the Texas Department of Emergency Management, and TEA to provide PPE for the school districts in the region, charter school districts, and also the private schools. So we do provide some support to private schools. Private schools do have the opportunity to go onto our Region 4 website and sign up for courses and that sort of thing. So we do provide support as they request it from private schools as well, or private schools as well.
Great, great. Dr. Watson, what's the decision on extracurricular activities and travel for your school district?
So we are using wisdom based upon the data to help guide that, as well as the collaboration amongst all the superintendents in the region. We do rely a lot on the UIL to help guide and set those parameters by which we operate. It's important to understand that we did start all the districts in the region started our strength and conditioning training for our athletics and other UIL activities. And it was amazing within the first week, the number of cases that kept coming up, and we had to close and had to shut down. And that was with a small sample of students that were back. And so we are using, once again, wisdom and being able to do that at this particular time. The way we're doing it in Spring ISD is our operational decision meter does describe the processes of what's happening. So when we're in the red, as we are now, that does mean that there's no UIL activities or things that are happening after school. There's no way in the world that we would say that we can't bring students back to teach them how to read and to teach them learning, but it's okay to have sports practices after school. And so we've taken a stance with our athletic director to say that if it's not safe to come in for learning, which is our primary focus, then it's not safe to bring kids in for athletics after school.
Okay, and I think a final question here for both of you that really is important to the partnership as well. What sort of support or advice can the business community give to support your efforts as you reopen school this fall?
Dr. Watson, I'll let you go first.
I would say to really connect with the school districts within their area, as well as look at other districts that may have needs based upon the number or the level of economically disadvantaged students within that area. I think it's important that when we look at equity or inequities that happen within communities, that transcends the area where the store or the business is located, because we are one big community. So I think it's important for people to really connect with school districts to really understand what those needs are. I think the other thing is, with so much rhetoric out there, it's important to understand the facts and to really dig to see what the real storyline is behind the bold storyline that's normally portrayed in the media sometimes, to really get an understanding of what's really happening. I think more than anything that if we as a community, I mean, I always hear the tagline of being Houston strong. If we really are Houston strong, then how can we rally together? It's been phenomenal as a superintendent in spring that, yes, on the football field, I'll compete with all of the other superintendents to win that championship trophy. However, during this time, us really beginning to rally together, to share resources, to share plans, to share advice, it's really not one-upping anyone. It's us working together as a unified Houston strong community to do what's best for our community. At the end of the day, that's all we're going to have left is our community and what we did to sustain it. And education is the foundation of that. And whatever we can do to sustain that foundation, which really sets the stage for every single thing that we do within our district, that's the most important.
I'm not sure I can do better than that. That was perfect. I guess just as a kind of extension of the story that I shared with you about Operation Connectivity, this is great work, and it is going to go a long way to closing that gap, but it's not going to completely close the gap. So I think to our business community, to all of, and Houston has always been a place where the business community, the philanthropic community have supported our schools. So I just think we need to, as we finish this process and we see where we are, we need to make sure that we go back out to the business community and let them know what we need, because I feel very confident that if we share that with them, that they'll respond.
Well, we're at the end of our time, but thank you both so very much. I really, really appreciate the time and you taking the time out of your busy schedules. And hope to talk to you again very soon. And Carrie, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you.